This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Do you ever have a story that you just can't get out of your head?
One that you play the details of over and over with your friends?
Well, you've come to the right place. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan.
And this is Justice Pending,
a weekly true crime podcast where we discuss tantalizing crimes with more questions than answers.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Justice Pending. Today, I'm excited to welcome a special guest, a friend of mine from college and an excellent attorney and professor of journalism at Baylor University, Sommer Ingram Dean. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Claire. Thanks so much for having me. This is so exciting.
It is. It really is great to have you on the show. I know we have lots of conversations about all sorts of criminal cases and legal issues, but now we get to do it for an audience.
Yes, should be a good time.
It should. So, yeah, it's been a while since you and I have been in the newsroom together, if you can believe it.
No, I don't want to say how long, but you just did.
I did. I did the math, Summer.
Yeah, pretty crazy to think that, that long ago we were just intrepid little student journalists. I still, anytime I talk about my background in journalism or as a student journalist, I credit you with inspiring me to always just sort of get out there and not be afraid to search for the truth. So, and I still find you as an inspiration. So,
I love that, Summer. That's great to hear. I have wonderful memories of working stories with you, so I was excited to get you in the studio and talk about a wild and crazy case, Karen Reed.
Yeah. It's certainly been, I guess it's been several years now that this...
Quite the journey, yes.
The shenanigans have been in the news, yeah.
So I thought it would be a good one for us to discuss because we could talk about some of the media attention the case has gotten. We could talk about legal issues and decisions that have been made by the judge and attorneys, and lots of drama in this case, Summer.
Lots of drama. Can't wait to get into it.
So let's start out, from the beginning for people, just to give them a brief overview. So it was January 2022 when Karen Reed and her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, who's a Boston police officer, key point in this story, they go out for a night of drinking and partying, and it is apparently gets pretty rowdy.
Seems like it. It seems like it did and ended in an unfortunate way.
Yes. So lots of heavy drinking, which, affects people's memories and behavior. So that is another key point in this story and why things are so confusing and unclear. I think that plays a very big role. So in as much as we know about the evening, after they go out drinking, Karen says that she drops John off at a friend's house who's also a police officer. His name's Brian Albert. And according to Karen, that is the last time that she saw John. She drops him off at his friend's house. She drives away, and end of story. Right?
Right.
But the next day, O'Keefe's body is found in the snow outside of Brian Albert's house. And so he doesn't come home that night. He doesn't, make contact with people that are expecting to hear from him. So people go out looking for him. So it's around like 5 a.m. when he's discovered in the snow. And it's a very chaotic scene. And there are people who report, hearing Karen Reed say, I hit him. And so that has been, a lot has been made of that. The investigation really focuses on Karen Reed from the beginning as being potentially the actor in this case and being the one who caused John O'Keefe's death. And so she ends up being charged in this case for second-degree murder. And the story is that she has run over John O'Keefe with her vehicle. So it's vehicular manslaughter and leaving the scene of a deadly accident. So she's got 3 different charges here, and she maintains her innocence. She says she's not guilty. But let's talk a little bit about vehicular manslaughter. What do you know about this in terms of being like a way that people are charged for murder? Is this common?
Well, I will just state from the beginning, I'm not a criminal attorney, so we want to put that out there. But I guess I have a question for you. Was she charged with all 3 of these at the same time, or was she charged first with the manslaughter and, abandonment of the scene, and then did they later upcharge it to second?
My understanding, that she was indicted for all 3 of those charges in June of 2022 at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Well, I would say I guess she didn't really do herself any favors by saying, I think I hit him, or I hit him. Was she still under the influence at that time? I guess we don't know.
Yeah, we don't actually know for sure. I think based on the amount that they all, had to drink and the locations that they went to, the idea that 5 a.m. after a night of drinking, she's not going to be at her best at that moment. I think
tip top shape.
I think we can all agree. It's going to be rough, right? So yes. So, and then they do test, the victim's blood alcohol level, and he is heavily intoxicated over the legal limit.
Okay.
So, if you're just thinking that they were together and they were probably, drinking around the same level, I think it's probably a fair thing to assume.
Right. Okay. Well, in terms of vehicular manslaughter, I mean, I guess when I hear that term, it could be defined differently in different jurisdictions. I think, I think about you're out driving at night and you accidentally hit a kid on a bicycle. I mean, or something like that. If the prosecution's argument is that she purposely ran over him, then I definitely see why the second-degree murder charge comes into play. Sorry, I'm going to have a lot of questions.
That's okay.
So she says she dropped him off at his friend's house, who was another cop.
Right.
Did she see him walk inside? Did anyone inside the house say, yes, he came in? Or are they like, no, we didn't see him until he turned up the next morning?
Correct. They're saying he never came inside. He was not there, that he did not go inside. So we've got these 2 different theories, and that's really what opens up the defense theory of the case. And it's very interesting to hear that they have created an entire conspiracy theory that in the house where there were multiple police officers, that they got into a physical argument with John and that they beat him up. There's even an allegation that he was bitten by a dog, and then he was dumped in the snow, and they framed Karen Reed for murder.
I gotta say, I love a good conspiracy theory.
Yes.
That's so fascinating because why? I mean, I guess when I think about, police officers, I think that they're very much like, the brotherhood. And so is there a theory that they beat him up on purpose, or this just got out of control and they were like, whoops, now we got to get rid of the body?
Right. Basically, it's a drunken fight. This is not premeditated. This is the theory. I should just, to double clarify,
right, yes.
The defense's theory.
The theory they're putting forward.
Not been proven. The prosecution has, really heavily argued against it. And we will get to this in a moment, but there are multiple trials that go on in this case. And in the first trial, the defense is able to really put forth this alternate theory with Brian Albert as their alternative suspect.
Okay.
So that's allowed in the first trial. And it's something, of a wild card, a surprise. Typically, when cases go to trial, the prosecution doesn't know what the defense is going to make as their main argument. the first time they're really hearing about the case, the prosecution has to provide discovery to the defense of all the evidence that they have and the witnesses that they're going to call. But the defense gets the benefit of, the element of surprise.
Right. Yeah.
So in this case, as many of our listeners may already know, there was a mistrial. In 2024 was the first trial of Karen Read, and it went on for many weeks, and it was very hotly contested, lots of back and forth. And ultimately, the jury decided they could not rule in this case. They could not come up with a unanimous decision. And so it was a hung jury, and it was not known if it was going to go to trial again, because that doesn't have to happen. If you get a hung jury, the prosecution can decide that they no longer want to pursue this case. They can drop the charges, but that did not happen in this case. In fact, they decided to retry her in 2025, which is going on right now. We're going to put this episode out, and, just kind of the way news works, I'm sure there will be a verdict by the time we put the episode out.
By the time this gets out to the masses, yeah.
Right, in just a few days here. But right now the case is ongoing, the second trial, and this time the judge said the defense could not present this alternate suspect right off the bat.
Well, that kind of makes sense to me, because it doesn't seem like they have really anything to prove it. So, rather than just sort of sending the jury on like a wild goose chase, I could see the judge saying, no, we're not going to even go down that road if there's no evidence or anything even backing this theory up.
Right. So it was an interesting ruling. The judge actually said they couldn't put forth this alternate suspect unless they were able to prove up with evidence in their case in chief. So they're allowing some development of this theory, but unlike the first trial where they were like, Brian Albert, we believe, killed John O'Keefe, they cannot say that. They have to, if they can build their case and work their way to it, then they can get there. So that was an interesting difference between the two trials. And something else that happened that I really want to talk to you about is, in this case, the judge decided not to issue a gag order.
Insane behavior.
So this case seems just ripe for a gag order, because everyone was talking about it. It was all over the media. And then you have a mistrial. So
yeah.
Take me through, your thoughts on if you had been the judge and you were asked by the prosecution for a gag order.
Well, I don't envy the judge in this case at all. It's complicated. It's messy. The media's all over it. It seems like a nightmare. But certainly one of the first things I would have thought would be, hey, there's this like media circus sort of surrounding this. This is the exact sort of case that we, when we think about sort of balancing First Amendment rights and a defendant's right to a fair and impartial jury, like this is the sort of case that we're talking about. So I certainly would have probably immediately, once it became clear what kind of attention this was getting, issued a gag order. I can't help but think also it's not just the story of, this woman who may have, a scorned lover or whatever, but it involves a police officer. And so I have to think that just adds a whole other layer of people who feel very passionately about it one way or the other. And then you add in this whole conspiracy theory. So, I find it odd that the judge didn't issue some sort of gag order, especially given, like you said, the fact that there's a mistrial and then now there's a new trial. And as I understand it, between the two trials, the defendant has done a lot of press. There's been like a not a Netflix, but some sort of documentary put out about it. I saw the Vanity Fair pieces where she granted the journalist like pretty much kind of unfettered access. Like,
she let her sleep over at her house, which I just can't believe. But not called it a slumber party. Yeah.
Yeah. And, if you're the journalist, you're like, great, I guess I'm doing this.
Absolutely.
But yeah, all of that now colors this next trial, in addition
Yes.
to, people that have already made up their mind and what's being said on TikTok and the internet. So I'm wondering if that judge is regretting that decision. Is it the same judge for both trials?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
And I cannot believe there's not a gag order. I mean, I'm a journalist. I usually do not want gag orders. I
Right. Not something you're usually hoping for.
No, this is probably the only example I can think of where I'm like, yep, there should be a gag order. It makes sense.
It makes
And
total sense.
at any point, the judge could have decided to institute one, but did not. And yes, I don't think anyone expected her to go on the media blitz tour that she did. But not only the Vanity Fair piece, this multi-part documentary, and, she has not testified in her own defense during the trial, but her statements to the media have become part of the trial. They have played them, they've quoted them.
Of course.
They're entering them into evidence because, she made these statements and they are public statements and they're relevant to the case. So I was very surprised by that development that she did multiple interviews and the gag order still wasn't presented.
You have to wonder if the judge is just like, oh, well, it's too late. I don't know.
I think, they don't want to go back on what they said before and look like they're flip-flopping, but there's been another contentious media development. There's a blogger who runs a site called Turtle Boy News.
Okay.
And Turtle Boy himself faces charges for witness harassment.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about this.
So during the first trial, he was aggressively going up to people who were witnesses in the case and questioning them. And he has been very public about his belief that Karen Read was framed and that he believes the conspiracy theory. He thinks that this is an inside job with police officers involved in the murder and the cover-up and framing her. So
he's not exactly covering this objectively.
He's really not. Okay. No, and he wouldn't, in my experience, he's not presenting himself that way at all. He's talking about it as though he's doing a public service because he believes he's discovered the truth, and that's that Karen Read is innocent. Okay. So very different kind of journalism, a different type than, you and I are used to with traditional newsrooms, but journalism nonetheless, I guess we could say.
I guess giving information to the people. So he's been harassing witnesses.
That's, that is what the state is alleging. And so he was actually charged. He was removed from the courtroom for a time. He's now been allowed back into it. And, he has an attorney. He's fighting this, saying, it's his First Amendment right to question people in the case. It's just, it starts to get a little blurry. Again, the media circus. Like,
yes,
this could all be prevented and we could still have access to the trial. But
right. No one's saying, shut down the courtroom, right. But to not put into place, some very reasonable sort of restrictions that as the presiding judge, you have the power to put in place is very interesting.
I think so too.
So they've let Turtle Boy back into the courtroom.
They have, yes.
That's so funny to me. I wonder if, I don't know if you know this or not, but was the case getting as much buzz before his blog started, sort of talking about it and putting his theory forth? Because I feel like a lot of times some of these cases, it's like people are aware of them, but then like a blogger or someone who's not even a blogger, but just some random person starts talking about it, and then it sort of blows up.
I would say Vanity Fair probably had more to do with it blowing up than Turtle Boy. But yeah. But his coverage definitely contributed to the overall snowball effect of interest in the Karen Read case. And so now it's nearing the end of the second trial. The defense, it's their turn and they're calling witnesses. And something that's come up that is really a key piece of evidence is the broken taillight on the back end of Karen Reed's SUV. And
Yes.
so there are a couple theories for this broken taillight. The first one, as you might imagine, is that she backed into him and broke her taillight. And
Right.
that is how he was injured, and this is the evidence of it. But the defense is saying, and they have experts doing recreations, that the broken taillight could not have been caused by hitting a man, by hitting a person. And so they've done these recreations that are pretty creative. And they've actually alleged that a drink glass was thrown at the back of the vehicle. And that's what broke the taillight. And in fact, there is broken glass, appears to be a broken cocktail glass in the snow as well.
Okay.
So it's an interesting theory, the idea that there would have been a fight, that a drink would have been thrown as part of that fight. And we haven't talked about this yet, but there are lots of text messages and voicemails showing that Karen and John were fighting that evening. They, it got very heated. No one's saying this was a loving, joyous occasion that they were out and then suddenly he ends up dead, right?
Right. They're saying there's some sort of, as you might expect when there's a lot of heavy drinking, right? The emotions are high.
Yes.
Couples argue, friends argue.
Yes.
So that, I guess that's not surprising. Has anyone come out and said, even aside from this night, just in general, they have an unhealthy relationship and, they've witnessed anything borderline, abusive?
I'm not sure of the exact nature of their relationship. I do know that it was hot and cold, that they'd had numerous arguments, that friends were aware that they, things would get heated between them. I don't know if there's allegations of actual physical abuse or domestic violence or anything like that, but it's clear from the nature of the texts and the voicemails that this was a pretty heated night in their lives. So whether or not that's a pattern, I'm not entirely sure. But the key with the taillight is, was this caused before the murder or after? And there's another witness that has changed his story, and he is the snowplow driver, Sommer. And did he see a body in the snow when he was clearing the street or not? And now he claims he did not see anyone in the snow. And, his timeline, this was like around 4 a.m., that he did not see anyone in the snow. So that would seemingly support the defense's theory that John allegedly was beaten up inside the house and then dumped later after. Right. So there's a lot of discrepancies here. And I think it's always important to note that memory is so fallible and no one knows what they're seeing when they're seeing it is going to be part of a criminal trial.
Right. You're not aware that, hey, this may be the key fact in solving this mystery. 100%. This is, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, and we don't have time to get into it now, but I once witnessed a shooting that did not end in a death, but
you did tell me about this.
The four of us who witnessed it all remembered such different things, and you think, oh, when I witnessed something like that, there's no way it won't be burned into my memory. But it's just not. And so I'm not surprised that this guy is just doing his job. It's the middle of the night. It's dark. And he's like, did I see a lump in the snow? I don't know.
Right.
I wonder why, if the conspiracy theory is true, why would they have dumped his body in the front yard? Like, it seems like there would be better, I don't know, course.
Yeah.
To take.
It's certainly not hiding. It's out there in plain sight. But the idea that they were framing Karen, so you have to take a lot of leaps with this one.
Yeah.
And I love a good conspiracy theory as much as the next person. but I do have a hard time getting there with this case. And
sometimes the most obvious answer is the answer,
yes.
right? Like they've been fighting. She doesn't remember exactly, you know.
And she has brought up the fact that she could have hit him and forgotten about it and not realized that she hit him because of her state that evening, because of all the emotions, because of the late hour, lots of different reasons why that could be the case. And she has floated that possibility as well. So I'm very curious to see how this one ends up as
Yes.
is the nation. And something that I think we've touched on a little bit, but it's another key part of this case are just the injuries to John O'Keefe's body. And the prosecution argues that when you're hit by a vehicle, it is a violent, fast-moving accident, and you can have high impact injuries, which I don't think anyone can really argue with. But the defense is saying that they're inconsistent with the actual injuries on his body, and that they, point out these lacerations to his arm and very sort of specific injuries that they're trying to say could not be caused by a car, and they've tried to recreate it. And according to their expert, they can't get these exact injuries. To me, it's kind of like a needle in a haystack. Like, how could you know the exact position, the exact speed, all these different variables? But
sure, it is. I do find it
a lot of doubt.
Yeah, and that's what the defense has to do, right? They just have to cast doubt, poke holes in the prosecution's argument. So if they say, hey, look at all these, things that look like bite marks on the guy's arm, how would that have happened? If the defendant really ran him over with their car, sometimes that's enough for the jury to be like, you know what, we don't have the answer to that. And so we don't feel comfortable convicting. But I am curious about that myself. So someone is saying a dog was involved. Was there a dog at the house?
Correct. Yes. So there's a dog at the house where Karen says she dropped off John, and that's been brought into this case as the source of some of the injuries on John. So, and there's some, there's apparently some hair that's on John that has been described as pet hair at the scene. And they're trying to use that to, take this thread and say that he was around this dog. I don't know if they've gone as far as to are you doing DNA tests on the hair? Is it the same hair of this dog?
Is it the same breed?
Dog hair travels, right? I have dog hair from my black lab that I take with me pretty much everywhere I go. And, it's very interesting to think about, is the pet hair going to be the evidence that the jury
thing
decided?
That really exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say it seems like the defense is doing their job in planning doubt, and even if their theory is sort of far-fetched, I mean, you're still dealing with humans on the jury that, some people, one, may be a fan of conspiracy theories, and two, I imagine when you're in a situation like this, you're determining whether someone's guilty of murder or not. You want to be absolutely sure. So I gotta say, I think the defense is even as out there as it seems, they're doing a pretty good job.
I agree. It is a robust defense.
What is the story here? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so, justice is still pending in this case, and we will see what happens. And hopefully maybe you can come back on the show and we can do a follow-up episode after we get the verdict.
I would love that. This is one of those cases I'm just going to keep thinking about forever until we know the answer. So
definitely.
Hopefully we'll get answers soon.
Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of Justice Pending, and we'll be back next week with an all-new case.
Thanks, Claire.
Justice Pending is recorded in Dallas, Texas for Rebel Studios. It's hosted by me, Claire Sanama, and Susan Passoni. Our theme music is Bending Truth, licensed at premiumbeat.com. We appreciate all listener feedback. Leave a review wherever you're listening right now, and we might read it on the air.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.